America's election headquarters with some changes to the electoral map 1 week before Election Day, as the crystal ball from the University of Virginia's Center for Politics moves Arizona, Ohio, and Florida from leaning Democratic to toss-up states. Fox's electoral map also making the same switch for Florida, also moving Nevada from leans Democratic to toss-up. Alaska changes from solid Republican to leans Republican, while North Carolina moves out of the toss-up category to leaning Democratic. Joining us now with their thoughts, Joe Trippi, former Howard Dean campaign manager. Also with us, Karl Rove, former senior advisor and deputy chief of staff to George W. Bush. Both are Fox News contributors. Welcome to both of you. We've got 1 week to go, Joe. This thing is getting, well, more exciting by the day. Arizona, Florida, and Ohio now toss-up states, according to Larry Sabato's crystal ball. What do you think of those ratings?
I think he's absolutely right about those states, and I think, look, those battlegrounds are all going to be tight. There are all these states that are in that battleground territory are within a point or two or tied, so they all could go either way. The problem the map does still pretend for Trump, though, is that I think they have Hillary Clinton with all the states that are Democratic or leaning Democratic getting at 293 electoral votes. So Trump can win every single one of these swing states, every single one, Ohio, Florida, Nevada, even North Carolina, and take them all. And he still comes up short. That's why I think, John, that he is campaigning in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. It's not wistful thinking or polling. It's because he has to. He has to win one of those blue states, and most likely may have to win two of them if Hillary Clinton can pick off any of these swing states.
Is Joe right about that, Karl? I mean, I don't want you to disagree with him on air, but in so many of the recent elections, recent history elections, Ohio and Florida basically determined who the president was going to be. If Trump could win Ohio and Florida, in your view, could he still lose the election?
He could, but it's far more likely that he can win with him than win without him. I mean, think about it: 206 electoral votes that Mitt Romney got. If Trump wins Florida with 29, that gets him to 235. If he wins Ohio, it gets him to 253. He's ahead in Iowa. That would get him to 259. Then it's a question of trying to find 11 votes among, a Nevada and a New Hampshire, but it does in North Carolina. North Carolina would give it to him, but that's a state that's proven to be a little bit resistive. So I think it's important that when you're in this kind of a situation, buy yourself a couple of insurance policies. I'm not certain I'd buy New Mexico and Colorado and Michigan and Wisconsin. I'd concentrate on maybe half of those states, not four of them, but in Pennsylvania. But you got to buy yourself some insurance policies. She's got the advantage because she's got 242 electoral votes that the Democrats have carried in all 6 of the last presidential elections. He's got to take 1 or 2 of those states away, plus run most of the table on the toss-up states.
Well, is it, in your view, Joe, is it fruitless for him to be campaigning in states like Michigan and Pennsylvania?
Oh, no, not at all. I just think, I agree with Karl, though, that he sort of picked too many of them. I don't think it makes sense for him to spend the time he's spending in all those states. Pick 2 or 3 and go for it. Put all your money into those states, all your time into them. I don't hold much hope for him in Pennsylvania. I think that's been a trap for years. For the Republicans. It always looks like it's gettable, and then it just falls away at the end for them. I think that's a mistake. Karl might disagree with me, but I think Wisconsin might be more fertile territory for him. But he has to, I think, just look, the odds are that she's going to win some of these states. I'm not saying she won't, that she wins both Ohio and Florida, but she's going to win some of these toss-up states that are tied. And that means he has, and I agree with Karl, he's got to have an insurance policy, he's got to pick off a Wisconsin, got to hold on to Arizona. If she can somehow pull that off, and it looks doable, at least it's risky for Trump that she could take it. There's a lot of different ways she can still take this, even with him getting a bunch of these swing states.
What about Georgia? What about Utah, Karl? We had Evan McMullen on yesterday. Yeah. He is running neck and neck with the other 2 major party candidates in Utah. I think it's 6 electoral votes there, but it could be the death knell for the Trump campaign if McMullen were to win it.
Well, look, I think the events of Friday with the reintegration of the FBI investigation into Hillary's emails and the normal tendency that we've seen here as we come to the end for Republicans to return home means that there's some states that are on our map today that are not where they're going to end up being. And I think Utah is one of them. I think Utah is going to end up, we have it as a toss-up on the Fox News. I think the events of last Friday and the natural closing is going to mean that he takes a narrow plurality victory in Utah. I think this solidifies his position in Georgia, which the Democrats had hoped for. I think it solidifies his position in Iowa, makes it less likely that it's a real toss-up and maybe a slightly lean Republican. And I think this means that Arizona, where she's investing time, energy, and money, ends up being a Trump victory. So underneath the surface, the enthusiasm that's now happening since the reinvigoration of the FBI investigation on the Republican side, the diminution of enthusiasm on the Democratic side, it may not be enough to solve the entire election, but it's going to make some of these states that are Republican-leaning be more Republican-leaning. And it's going to have down-ballot effects. Indiana and Missouri, where he's already ahead, those states, I think, his margin is going to improve in those states, which helps the Republican Senate candidates in those states. And similarly in North Carolina and Nevada, where he's slightly behind, I think his position is going to strengthen, and that's going to help the down-ballot candidates as well.
1 week to go. Karl Rove, Joe Trippi, thank you.
Thank you, John.
Amber Phillips is a political reporter for the Washington Post, and she's good enough to join us now to discuss it all. And Amber, I want to begin again with that new tracking poll we just saw from your paper and ABC News. It has Trump in the lead by a point. How would you, 7 days out, summarize the state of the race?
It's basically tied. And I think it's, I could summarize it this way. While we're seeing a totally abnormal race in the headlines, so many October surprises and twists and turns, in the polls, it's kind of shaping up to be a relatively normal presidential race. You got conservatives, evangelicals, white voters, rural voters, largely falling for Donald Trump. On the other side, urban voters, voters who associate with non-religion, liberals falling for Clinton. Right now, 7 days out, they're tied.
Have we seen any impact then from the news that broke again last Friday to much consternation on the part of Hillary Clinton, her campaign members, and certainly Democrats across the country who felt that Director Jim Comey had essentially put his thumb on the scale here? Have we seen any impact as it regards polling?
Not really, but I caveat that with it's hard to tell, right? Because we're also seeing Republicans who have been skeptical of Trump kind of come home to them in these last few days, right around the time this FBI stuff blew up. The only notable drop in Clinton's numbers anywhere I've seen is in this post-ABC News poll. She lost about 8 points in enthusiasm among voters. Clinton has always struggled with enthusiasm, so has Trump. But that could be a potential warning sign for Clinton, who really needs Democrats to come out in big numbers, because as the cliche goes, you got to get people to show up to the polls if you want to win.
And it's been argued that the candidate who's really in the headlines in this election cycle is the one with the problem. And so we've seen here something that one analyst earlier today called the Clinton classic, finding the pivot and hitting that pivot hard. We've seen the Clinton campaign then begin to discuss alleged ties between Donald Trump and his campaign and Russia and Russian interests. Do you think, in terms of strategy, that's the best way for the Clinton campaign to go?
Well, it's tough to say because I don't see the FBI backing them up on this, right? James Comey has said he's not going to talk about it. The FBI has said we don't comment on ongoing investigations. Clinton could argue, and there are Democrats who argue there's a double standard there when they're talking about Clinton's emails so publicly. What I think Clinton has done really well in terms of pivoting is frame the conversation around her emails back around to James Comey and the head of the FBI director, and sort of say, wait a second, this is really unfair. And you've seen several Republicans, former Bush administration officials, even two current lawmakers in Congress right now, kind of back her up on that. So I think in terms of pivoting, she's been more successful to talk about the FBI and put the blame on them than to kind of take the blame herself or pass it on to Donald Trump when it comes to his maybe culpability with Russia.
And that suggests perhaps some divisions within the GOP. To that point, House Speaker Paul Ryan spoke about his party's nominee in an interview this morning. I want to play just a bit of it and get your thoughts on the other side.
I stand where I've stood all fall and all summer. In fact, I already voted here in Janesville for our nominee last week in early voting. We need to support our entire Republican ticket.
You did say that you weren't going to campaign with him. Have you changed